Good evening and welcome back to another episode of The Longing, where today we are going to be continuing to read The Sleeper Awakes by H.G. Wells. So, let's get going. Asano touched his arm and gave him a warning look, and forthwith another of these mechanisms screamed deafeningly and gave tongue in a shrill voice. Yahaha, yahaha, yap, hear a live paper yelp. Live paper, yaha. Shocking outrage in Paris. Yahaha. The Parisians exasperated by the black police to the pitch of assassination. Dreadful reprisals, savage times come again. Blood, blood, yaha. The nearer babble machine hooted stupendously. Galoop, galoop, drowned the end of the sentence, and proceeded in a rather flatter note than before, with novel comments on the horrors of disorder. Law and order must be maintained, said the nearer babble machine. But, began Graham. Don't ask questions here, said Asano, or you will be involved in an argument. Then let us go on, said Graham, for I want to know more of this. As he and his companion pushed their way through the excited crowd that swarmed beneath these voices towards the exit, Graham conceived more clearly the proportion and features of this room. Altogether, great and small, there must have been nearly 1,000 of these erections, piping, hooting, bawling and gabbling in that great space, each with its crowd of excited listeners, the majority of these men dressed in blue canvas. There were all sizes of machines, from the little gossiping mechanisms that chuckled out mechanical sarcasm in odd corners, through a number of grades to such 50-foot giants as that which had first hooted over Graham. This place was unusually crowded, because of the intense public interest in the course of affairs in Paris. Evidently the struggle had been much more savage than Ostrog had represented it. All the mechanisms were discoursing upon that topic, and the repetition of the people made the huge hive buzz with such phrases as lynched policemen, women burnt alive. But does the master allow such things? Asked a man near him. Is this the beginning of the master's rule? The word that I've blanked out and ignored is actually one that I only recently learned as being not as being a racist term. So, yeah, and I wasn't aware of it until fairly recently. But either way, I have removed it for a purpose. Is this the beginning of the master's rule? For a long time after he had left the place, the hooting, whistling, and braying of the machines pursued him. Galoop, galoop, yaha-ha, yaha, yap, yaha. I don't understand what's going on with that. Is this the beginning of the master's rule? Directly they were out upon the ways, he began to question Asano closely on the nature of the Parisian struggle. This disarmament, what was their trouble? What does it all mean? Asano seemed chiefly anxious to reassure him it was all right. But these outrages... You cannot have an omelette, said Asano, without breaking eggs. It is only the rough people, only in one part of the city. All the rest is all right. The Parisian labourers are the wildest in the world, except ours. What? The Londoners? No, the Japanese. They have to be kept in order. But burning women alive? A commune, said Asano. They would rob you of your property. They would do away with property and give the world over to mob rule. You are master. The world is yours. But there will be no commune here. There is no need for black police here. And every consideration has been shown. It is their own, French-speaking, Senegal regiments and Timbuktu. Regiment, said Graham. I thought there was only one. No, said Asano, and glanced at him. There is more than one. Graham felt unpleasantly helpless. I do not think he began, and stopped abruptly. He went off at a tangent to ask for more information about these Babel machines. For the most part, the crowd present had been shabbily or even raggedly dressed, and Graham learnt that so far as the more prosperous classes were concerned, in all the more comfortable private apartments of the city were fixed Babel machines that would speak directly. A lever was pulled. The tenant of the apartment could connect this with the cables of any of the great news syndicates that he preferred. When he learnt this, presently, he demanded the reason of their absence from his own suite of apartments. Asano was embarrassed. "I never thought," he said. "Ostrog must have had them removed." Graham stared. "How was I to know?" he exclaimed. "Perhaps he thought they would annoy you," said Asano. "They must be replaced directly I return," said Graham after an interval. He found a difficulty in understanding that this newsroom and the dining hall were not great central places, that such establishments were repeated, almost beyond counting, all over the city. But ever and again during the night's expedition his ears would pick out from the tumult of the ways the peculiar hooting of the organ of Boss Ostrog. Galoop, galoop, or the shrill yaha-ha, yaha-yap. I really don't get that. Hear a live paper yelp of its chief rival. Repeated, too, everywhere, were such creches as the one he now entered. It was reached by a lift, and by a glass bridge that flung across the dining hall, and traversed the ways at a slight upward angle. To enter the first section of the place necessitated the use of his solvent signature, under Asano's direction. They were immediately attended to by a man in a violet robe and gold clasp, the insignia of practising medical men. He perceived from this man's manner that his identity was known, and proceeded to ask questions on the strange arrangements of the place without reserve. On either side of the passage, which was silent and padded, as if to deaden the footfall, were narrow little doors, their size and arrangement suggestive of the cells of a Victorian prison. But the upper portion of each door was of the same greenish transparent stuff that had enclosed him at his awakening, and within, dimly seen, lay, in every case, a very young baby in a little nest of wadding. Elaborate apparatus watched the atmosphere and rang a bell far away in the central office at the slightest departure from the optimum of temperature and moisture. A system of such creches had almost entirely replaced the hazardous adventures of the old world nursing. The attendant presently called Graham's attention to the wet nurses. A vista of mechanical figures, with arms, shoulders, and breasts of astonishingly realistic modelling, articulation, and texture, but mere brass tripods below, and having in the place of features a flat disc bearing advertisements likely to be of interest to mothers. Of all the strange things that Graham came upon that night, none jarred more upon his habits of thought than this place. The spectacle of the little pink creatures, their feeble limbs swaying uncertainly in vague first movements, left alone, without embrace or endearment, was wholly repugnant to him. The attendant doctor was of a different opinion. His statistical evidence showed beyond dispute that in the Victorian times the most dangerous passage of life was the arms of the mother, that their human mortality had ever been most terrible. On the other hand, this creche company, the International Creche Syndicate, lost not 0.5% of the 1,000,000 babies or so that formed its peculiar care. But Graham's prejudice was too strong even for those figures. Along one of the many passages of the place, they presently came upon a young couple in the usual blue canvas, peering through the transparency and laughing hysterically at the bald head of their firstborn. Graham's face must have showed his estimate of them, for their merriment ceased and they looked abashed. But this little incident accentuated his sudden realization of the gulf between his habits of thought and the ways of the new age. He passed on to the crawling rooms and the kindergarten, perplexed and distressed. He found the endless long playrooms were empty. The latter-day children, at least, still spent their nights in sleep. As they went through these, the little officer pointed out the nature of the toys, developments of those devised by that inspired sentimentalist, Froebel. There were nurses here, but much was done by machines that sang and danced and dandled. And with that, we come to the end of the episode. So I will say thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, or night. No matter what time of day it is, I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.